made to you so special? Nothing. I'm just a kid from Brooklyn. I was from Brooklyn.
Brooklyn!
Were you scared of that? No, not at all, huh?
Nope.
Oh, okay. You're from Brooklyn, huh?
I just want to rap. Okay, guys, Frank Stout, just a guy from Brooklyn. I'm here to bring you the top 30 movies of 2024. My overall thoughts, it was a very, very weak year for mainstream movies. I thought horror movies had a very good year. It was a good year for independent movies. But my biggest issue this year was endings. We had a lot of really bad endings, really long endings, sometimes multiple endings for one movie. There's also a really bad trend with runtimes. Obviously, if a movie is really epic, you can push a movie to something like 3 hours. But something like a horror movie should never go past like an hour and a half. I think that should be the max. As always, before I get into it, we got to go through my 2 rules. Rule number 1 is spoilers. Because I will be discussing endings, not in detail, but whether they were good or bad. Some might consider that a spoiler. So medium spoiler warning on that front. And as always, this is a favorites list, not a best list. So if you want to converse with me about my list, the best thing you can do is show me yours in the comments section. Kicking things off at honorable mention number 1 is Oddity, which follows a medium and shopkeeper who is still grieving the death of her twin sister a year prior, when a life-size wooden doll from her collection becomes crucial to her quest to uncover the truth about her sister's murder. Coincidentally, at this time, Miami had unveiled a statue of NBA Hall of Famer Dwayne Wade, which he and everyone else laughingly made fun of because it looks nothing like Wade. Seriously, the memes were hilarious. So I go see Oddity, see the creepy wooden doll, and laugh my ass off. Not exactly the emotional response you're looking for here. But to be fair, the movie was creepy, the doll was creepy, and it had a nice twist. Coming in at honorable mention number 2 is my hot take for my video, and that is Afraid. It was marketed as a horror movie, and if that's what you're expecting, it totally sucks. But this tale about a family beta testing an AI assistant for their home, think Alexa, gets into some very interesting stuff, especially what possibly can be done with faking footage. It's actually a thriller, and I really enjoyed it, despite the studio trying very hard to pass it off as horror. They even threw in a few jump scares, which seemed completely out of place. I say give it a shot. If you still think it's a hot take, I can live with that. Coming in at honorable mention number 3 is Lowlifes. It's a B-movie Texas Chainsaw with a twist. It's bloody and fun and reminds you to never judge a book by its cover. The less you know, the better, so I'll leave it there. And this was made by one of my favorite streaming apps, Tubi. Great job. Coming in at number 30 is Strange Darling. Set in rural Oregon, it follows a man and woman who have a one-night stand that turns into a cat and mouse game of murder. Once again, the less you know going in, the better. You got great performances by Will Fitzgerald, Kyle Garner, Barbara Hershey, and Ed Begley Jr. Coming in at number 29 is Abigail. The trailer had me hyped for months with a little girl ballerina vampire hunting people in an old mansion. And I love the cast despite it having Catherine Newton of Quantumania and Lisa Frankenstein fame. I seriously find her utterly annoying. The first 2 acts were really strong, and even for a vampire film, this one's got gallons and gallons of blood. And then it all falls apart in the 3rd act, with some, I'll say, changes of allegiances, and an ending that still has me scratching my head. I'm really happy to see that Melissa Barrera is still doing her thing after dropping out of the Scream franchise. Bottom line, if you like vampires and blood, this is probably for you. Coming in at number 28 is Beetlejuice. The winner of the Let's Do a Sequel, even though it's too late and everyone is really old movies that were everywhere this year. The movie feels like it's missing a middle act, and they mask this with a few musical numbers and for some strange reason, a lot of disco music, which gives new meaning to the saying, deader than disco. We're talking Bee Gees and Donna Summer, so at least it's the best of the best, right? Why did it make my list? Jenna Ortega, Michael Keaton, and Winona Ryder do a great job with what they were given to work with. But my favorite was Willem Dafoe playing a dead actor who plays a cop who is now a real cop in the afterlife. And to be fair, I really like the disco stuff. Hey, I was born in the 70s. Coming in at number 27 is Your Monster. This mashes up your stand-up breakup rom-com with Beauty and the Beast and your childhood monster in the closet, all wrapped up into one. Melissa Barrera, again, just keeps killing it in every project she does, and she's got great chemistry with Tommy Dewey, who plays the monster. This was a pleasant surprise with an ending that put an exclamation point on the whole thing. Coming in at number 26 is In a Violent Nature, a modern indie version of Friday the 13th taken more seriously, complete with signature mask and campfire exposition scene. The kills in this are next level, with the woman standing at the edge of a cliff being the standout. But the pace is a little slow, and you kind of follow the killer from a behind-the-shoulder point of view, and at times it slows down to a crawl. So it's not really something I'm going to rewatch often. It definitely makes you yearn for a new Friday the 13th film, especially if it has kills like this. Coming in at number 25 is Wicked. Did I really want to see a 3-hour musical knowing it's only part 1 of 2? Hell to the no. But I've always been a fan of The Wizard of Oz, and I've always enjoyed my fair share of musicals. Shout out to the new Mean Girls remake that almost made this list. I'm not gonna lie, the first 2 acts are downright painful to get through because the runtime is ridiculously too long. The entire Wicked play is under 3 hours, and that's part 1 and 2 combined. To make things worse, the songs weren't anything I'm going to remember either. But the story is interesting, with similarities to the Star Wars prequel trilogy and the 80s teen comedy Can't Buy Me Love. The prequels painted Darth Vader into a more tragic, sympathetic character, and this does the same for the Wicked Witch. But in the middle of all this, during a night out, Alphaba, the Wicked Witch, decides to do a strange dance, to which everyone responds unkind. But Glinda decides to mimic her dance, and all of a sudden everybody joins in, reminiscent to the Anteater Festival dance in Can't Buy Me Love. And just like that movie, Glinda's friendship leads to popularity for Alphaba. The third act totally won me over. It's epic with a capital E. Coming in at number 24 is Heretic. This Hugh Grant-led religious horror movie about 2 Mormon missionaries who get trapped in a deadly game with a sinister stranger will do for door-to-door religious folk what Jaws did for swimmers long ago. The first half is a history lesson of sorts on not just Mormons, but also the roots of religion as a whole, and I found it all fascinating. Using Grant's charm as a creep factor is unsettling to say the least. But I found the second act to be a little bit of a letdown, with a particular character going from totally clueless to Sherlock fucking Holmes in the blink of an eye. Still, this is a great display of what Grant can do in a horror setting. Coming in at number 23 is The First Omen. The prequel to The Omen suffers from the fact that I saw a ton of Nun movies in just a few months span, and it takes a big old dump on the original Omen's established lore.
I saw its mother.
You saw my wife.
I saw its mother.
You're referring to my wife.
Its mother, Mr. Thorne.
This is blackmail, then come out and say it. What is it that you're trying to say?
His mother was a...
You have Sydney Sweeney's Immaculate came out right before this, and they're ridiculously similar. But if you like creepy nun movies that pay homage to themes and scenes from like Rosemary's Baby, 1981's Possession, and even The Omen itself, you're gonna enjoy this. There's a scene with a demonic hand coming out of the holiest of holies that had everybody talking. There's also something that happens at the end that opens up the possibility for further entries, so maybe we get something in the future. Coming in at number 22 is Subservience. When his wife becomes sick, a struggling father buys a lifelike android named Alice, played by Megan Fox, to help with the housework. It's basically a techie hand that rocks the cradle, and it also looks strikingly similar to the TV series Humans, starring Gemma Chan. I don't know, but maybe somebody should contact their legal team. It's fun and sexy, and I was curious to see Michelle Morone from those silly 365 Netflix sex movies to play the father character. It goes exactly as you would expect it to, but hey, you get Fox in some pretty steamy scenes. Coming in at number 21 is the Roadhouse remake. Does the Patrick Swayze 80s Roadhouse need a remake? Probably not, but you could give it another title and it's a pretty fun, cheesy movie. Jake Gyllenhaal plays a bouncer with anger issues hired to protect the struggling business. Conor McGregor plays his nemesis, and he really hams it up, going over the top, running around naked half the time. Just turn off your brain and have some fun with it. And don't worry, it's not going to mess with Patrick Swayze's legacy. Coming in at number 20 is Stream, a slasher movie from the guys who brought you the Terrifier movies, and it's pretty clever, with a group of people staying in a resort being hunted by a stream competition for 4 killers in cool techie masks. The female doll killer was easily my favorite, and her partner was Art the Clown himself, David Howard Thornton, playing a mischievous killer. It also boasts an all-star cast of horror legends. Some have actual roles, while others pull cameo duty. This would have been placed way higher if not for the 2-hour runtime, which is just not justified here. But I really hope we get a tighter Stream 2 with a bigger budget, fingers crossed. Coming in at number 19 is Sting. A rebellious 12-year-old girl finds a tiny spider in her rundown apartment building, but it soon starts to grow at a monstrous rate and develops an insatiable appetite for blood. For such a small-scale creature feature, it pays homage to some heavyweight movies like Terminator and Aliens, and it has some heart as well. The movie takes place in Brooklyn, but I suspect otherwise. Coming in at number 18 is Smile 2. More colorful and extravagant than the original, with the main character being a pop celebrity. Naomi Scott does a fantastic job dealing with the entity that's systematically driving her insane. I still think she looks like a female version of James Franco, which I guess makes her a handsome woman? Anyway, after a great twist comes the final act that plays a little too much in the what is real and what isn't sandbox. That lost me somewhat. Still, it's a worthy sequel to a great concept. Coming in at number 17 is Twisters. I'm not a particularly big fan of the original Twister, even when disaster films were all the rage. But I got invested in all the characters, and there's a cute little rom-com built into all this destruction. For you DC fans, David Corenswet plays a sort of bad guy role. Signed on to be the next Superman, I kept looking to see if I could imagine him in that costume. The tornado scenes are powerful and realistic, showing you just how dangerous they can be. Coming in at number 16 is Y2K, an extremely silly horror comedy where the stuttering dork from the It remake, the fat kid from Deadpool 2, and that chick who's going to play Snow White that everybody on the internet hates try to survive the dawn of an apocalypse where 90s technology turns on humanity, which obviously is a joke in itself. It averages like 50 90s references per minute. So whether you loved or hated the 90s, you'll definitely spot a lot of stuff that's going to make you reminisce. It starts out a little like Superbad, turns into This Is the End, then goes all full Independence Day with the help of Fred Durst. I can see myself pairing this with last year's 80s comedy Totally Killer for a fun double feature. Coming in at number 15 is The Deliverance, a Netflix exorcist in the hood of sorts, with Glenn Close playing the grandma, and I will never see her the same way again. Seriously, she deserves a fucking award for this shit. Andra Day also plays the mother, and the kids all do a great job as well. 2/3 of the movie focus more on the family drama, and that's where it shined brightest. And the third act is your generic possession movie stuff. It gets a little preachy too, but it's so worth the watch. And the end lets you know that this is all based on a real house with a lot of controversy. I'm hoping to find a documentary about the whole thing. Coming in at number 14 is Maxine, spelled with 3 X's, of course. The third entry in the X trilogy was one of the most anticipated movies of the year for me. When I saw the famous Psycho house in the trailer, I almost lost it. It's so 80s, but in that Hollywood Boulevard dirty cheap kind of way. Definitely inspired by exploitation movies like Savage Streets and Angel. Mia Goth doesn't disappoint here, and Kevin Bacon comes out of nowhere playing a sleazy mustache-twirling villain. There's some great kills, and the soundtrack is rockin'. I was satisfied, and all I needed was for the story to wrap things up, despite it being very predictable. Ugh, but what a terrible ending. Sorry, Ty West, but you shit the bed on this one. It's like they had 3 different endings, couldn't decide, so they threw them all in. Come on, man. Coming in at number 13 is the Salem's Lot remake. Pushed back multiple times, this ended up getting dumped on HBO Max, so I was really worried about how bad it was gonna be. I happen to think very highly of the original, which I grew up watching, and that scene with the kid vampire outside the window used to haunt my dreams as a child. Maybe it was the low expectations, but this was a pleasant surprise, with it having some elements of Lost Boys, with a kid reading comics to learn more about vampires' weaknesses. There's also some great creepy scenes and imagery with vampires on rooftops with glowing eyes late at night. The ending is a little different from the OG, which is a positive, and more importantly, it doesn't outlive its welcome. Is it as good as the original? Absolutely not. But it's a fun little vampire movie. Coming in at number 12 is the Nosferatu remake. Nosferatu is a German version of the Bram Stoker novel with some differences. The biggest being Count Orlok, which is extremely different from the handsome gentleman that Count Dracula is. Where Salem's Lot is checkers, this is clearly a complex chess game. I couldn't help comparing it to the 90s Coppola Dracula, which is more fantasy gothic romance. This is darker and more terrifying. Orlok looks different, even from his earlier versions. Just like Coppola, I notice a similarity to the real-life historical Vlad Tepes. He's also monstrous, and the way he drains his victims is absolutely sick. Nicholas Hoult, Willem Dafoe, and Craven the Hunter himself, Aaron Taylor Johnson, gave fantastic performances. But whether it's Dracula or Nosferatu, it's only going as far as its 2 female leads take it. And Lily Rose Depp and Emma Corrin didn't have the presence that I was looking for. Runtime is 2 hours, with some parts being very slow. Overall, it's a beautiful movie that's kind of boring at times, but it's got great atmosphere. Coming in at number 11 is Carryon. The answer to What If Die Hard 2 and Red Eye Had a Baby, as a young airline security guard is blackmailed by a mysterious passenger who threatens to smuggle a dangerous package onto a plane on Christmas Eve. It's got the twists, the thrills, and the action. Taron Egerton does a serviceable job playing Ethan Kopech, the TSA agent put on the spot, while his girlfriend, played by Sophia Carson, gives you something really pretty to look at. All the while, Jason Bateman steals every scene, doing what he's been doing since 1981, guest starring on Little House on the Prairie, at the tender age of 12. There's a few other familiar faces in this Netflix holiday action thriller. Is it anything you haven't seen before? Doubtful, but entertaining nonetheless. And kicking things off my top 10 at number 10 is Longlegs. This satanic Silence of the Lambs delivers by being creepy as all hell, pun intended. Nick Cage gets under your skin by playing an old albino bag lady serial killer. You can barely recognize him in this. You follow FBI agent Lee Harker, who has psychic abilities and probably is on the spectrum, being able to process and find patterns and inconsistencies, but it's all about atmosphere with stuff like creepy homemade dolls and little girls being targeted. It's not something I'm going to rewatch very often, but it is so effective. Cage isn't in it as much as you might think, but you take him out of this movie and it would suffer greatly. Coming in at number 9 is Aora. Brooklyn stripper slash escort gets with Russian mobster's son in a modern day Pretty Woman. It's sexy, awkward, and hilarious in a grounded kind of way. Mickey Madison does a fantastic job as she goes from luckiest dancer at the strip club to caught in a complete clusterfuck. The mobster's son, played by Mark Edelston, is like a teenage Borat with unlimited funds, and the mobster scrambling to fix the situation gives for some great comedy. The movie's filmed predominantly in Brooklyn, so yeah, I'm a little biased. Oh, and did I enjoy the heavy nudity, sex, and stripper scenes? Nah. Coming in at number 8 is Speak No Evil. A family on vacation befriends a charming British couple and accepts an invitation to spend a weekend at their remote countryside home. James McAvoy is now a force in this business. You can see he gives it his all in every scene with such passion, veins popping aplenty. Being someone from Brooklyn, I have some trouble believing anyone I know would stick around after even the first few red flags. The dirty bed sheets would have had me packing up the car. And don't get me started on that whole thing with the stuffed animal. The family we're supposed to be rooting for is a little unlikable. The father is a wimp and the mother annoying, but everything comes into play and you get a hell of a finale. Coming in at number 7 is Late Night with the Devil, a period piece hearkening to the days of Johnny Carson. It's very campy with the tube TV visual quality and those 70s colors and patterns as a controversial talk show host who secretly lost his wife to lung cancer struggles to stay relevant during Sweeps Week. Desperate to turn his fortunes around, he plans a Halloween special like no other, unaware he's about to unleash evil into the living rooms of America. I can see people maybe who didn't experience that time period possibly having trouble connecting to the film, but it's still a fun watch with some nice twists and some obvious ones, to be fair. Coming in at number 6 is The Substance. Demi Moore returns to give you an insane body horror epic. She plays a star that just hit 50, and her womanizer boss, played by an over-the-top Dennis Quaid, just canceled her show because she's lost her looks and sex appeal. This movie is all about that theme. She comes across an experimental new drug therapy known as The Substance, which promises to make her young again. The gratuitous butt, breast, and crotch shots are all put in your face time and time again, but for a purpose. It's like if your father catches you smoking a cigarette, so he shoves you in a closet and makes you smoke a whole pack. The body horror effects are glorious, and I think they're going to become the stuff of legend. Margaret Qualley plays the younger version of Moore, and she absolutely nails it. And then we get to an ending that's just so over the top and absolutely way too long. You could have probably shaved at least 10 to 15 minutes off this shit and have a far better film. Coming in at number 5 is Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Taking place long after the events of the Caesar trilogy, we get new ape characters in uncharted territory, as there always has been an untouched middle area even for the original older ape timeline. The movie is stunning to the point, but you don't know what is an actual location or if it's all CGI. Young ape Noah must go on a quest to rescue his people from Proxima Caesar and encounters a speaking human. The ending is taking the franchise in new directions, and it's unclear as to whether this is a good thing. Only time will tell. If you're a fan of the Planet of the Apes franchise, I did a full franchise ranking. Coming in at number 4 is Terrifier 3. The highest grossing unrated film of all time improves on the second entry by having a tighter pace and runtime and having Art the Clown play in the Christmas sandbox, which is a real blast. You also get better performances from David Howard Thornton and final girl Lauren Lavera, who goes full Rob Zombie Halloween 2 with PTSD from the events of Terrifier 2. She also has more of a physical performance this time around. Damien Leone pushes the boundaries even further with some scenes that might not be okay with some people. But we Terrifier fans just keep asking for more, and let me tell you, our numbers continue to grow with each entry. For those of you interested in Leone and the Terrifier movies, I did a full ranking recently. Coming in at number 3 is Alien Romulus. Fede Alvarez gives you one of the best of the Alien franchise. Just don't expect much to add to the overall story. This is more of a greatest hits adventure, tons of callbacks and Easter eggs, and more importantly, it brings back H.R. Giger's genitalic imagery that made the original so weird and special. David Johnson does a fantastic job giving us a new take on the android character. Again, we get a movie that ends a couple of times. And of course, that bloats the runtime. Fede Alvarez, you gotta wrap that shit up. Upon its release, I did a full franchise ranking for those of you who are fans. And my runner-up to this list at number 2 is Dune II. I can still remember the buzz over the Dune books when I was a kid. I never got around to reading them, but all I can say is Dune 2 is absolutely epic, with huge moments everywhere. The first one did the heavy lifting, introducing the characters and that world, so this one can go deeper and have more development between characters. It's kind of a weird Game of Thrones in space, but it's also a Messiah story, and the questions of belief are at the center here. Rebecca Ferguson continues to show her presence and chops. Florence Pugh has entered the game. Timothée Chalamet, Zendaya, and Austin Butler all give strong performances. But I really like Javier Bardem the most. He gets to add a little comedy to all that seriousness. The sandworm wrangling scenes and the duel between Atreides and Rautha absolutely bury anything from the 80s Lynch version. And to think this movie wasn't even guaranteed. And my number 1 movie of 2024 is Deadpool and Wolverine. It doesn't have the greatest story or best written script. It isn't even what I wanted, as I was expecting Deadpool to play in the MCU, which were only teased on that front. This is more of a love letter to the Fox, Marvel, X-Men, and Fantastic Four movies. Its biggest strength or weakness, depending on how you see it, is it has a ton of cameo porn, and I enjoyed every second of it. Hugh Jackman has given us everything he can with the Wolverine character. He gives you a new portrayal this time with accurate comic book costume and a completely different arc. Ryan Reynolds at this point owns the Deadpool character, and he has perfect chemistry with Jackman. The banter between them is absolutely priceless. Soundtrack is also a standout, with songs kicking off scenes with a boom, although I could have done with a little less Madonna. But I'm gonna be honest, this movie is not perfect. Reynolds no longer works side by side with TJ Miller, and it continues to show. Cable, Domino, and Fire Fist are all missing. Vanessa broke with him because why? And the overall story is nothing to brag about. Regardless of all these flaws, it's still Deadpool and Wolverine, and it's the fucking tits. It's so rewatchable, I might pop it in right now after filming. Well, guys, that about wraps it up. I really want to wish a happy new year to everyone from the city that never sleeps. Peace.
pocket full of dreams, baby, I'm from New York.